I recently asked men in their 40s, 50s, and 60s to send me their most personal fitness questions. And in this video, I'm gonna answer those questions. And what I've seen coaching men over 40 is that a lot of these questions are universal. So chances are I'll cover something you've been wondering about too. My name's Rio and I help busy men over 40 gain muscle, lose fat, and transform their bodies using my Polarity method, which is a 2 workout per week minimalist fitness system. Over the last decade, I've transformed my body from this to this. And while I'm not over 40 myself, I coach men who are. So I know exactly what works for your body at this stage of life. So the first question comes from Jeff, and he asked, how to safely start after years of not working out for men over 50. So generally speaking, my clients fall into one of 3 categories. Either they're in your position to where they have some prior training experience, but they sort of fell off and now they're trying to get back into it, or they're just getting into fitness brand new, like they've never touched a weight, never been into fitness, and they're just now starting to embark on their fitness journeys, or they've been into fitness for quite some time, but they haven't really seen the results that they're after and they're seeking a new method. So what I do for clients in your particular situation, and my advice to you, would be 3 different things. The first thing would be to have a clear, structured, and proven plan to follow. Do not wing it, man. I see so many guys over 40 just completely winging it with random workouts, random diets, and no system to actually follow. And that is just a recipe for disaster. And it's gonna waste so much time. So if I were you, the first thing I would do is try and find a plan to follow, because otherwise you're gonna be on YouTube all day watching 20 different fitness influencers trying to piece something together, but you're also always going to be second guessing yourself because you have no idea if what you put together is going to work or if it is even working. So first things first, follow a proven plan that you know works for men over 50, right? And then the next thing would be to get form guidance, right? This is actually the first thing that I do for my clients when they come on board. I set them up with their workout system, and then what they do is they film a set from each exercise in the program, and then they take it to a call with me and we review it together and we make sure their form is dialed in. The reason we do this first is because it's really the most important thing to get right if you want to stay injury free. Because if you do not get guidance from someone who knows what they're doing, you're just going to be performing the exercises incorrectly, and then that's how you're going to hurt yourself. So this is something, by the way, that I do for my clients. So if it's something that you're interested in, you can click the link in my description. You can book a call with me, see if I might be able to help you. But if it's not going to come from me, at least find someone who knows what they're doing to review your form, right? Just make sure that that's dialed in from the start, because you do not want to learn the wrong habits right at the start. You want to make sure your form is good, your habits are dialed in right from the start so that you set a strong foundation for future success, right? And then the next thing I would say is that you want to start light with your training and build up slowly. And most importantly, do not compare yourself to anyone else in the gym. You might be looking at guys who are in their 20s or even men over 50 who've been training for 30 years. And obviously they're going to be stronger than you. So don't compare your weights to theirs. I see this happen a lot with men over 40. They let their egos get in the way and then they slap too much weight on the bar. They start too heavy, and then not only do they hit a quick plateau, but they also injure themselves, right? So start with weights that are appropriate for your current level and then build up slowly. Do not rush the process. That is how you get hurt. Do not look at what anyone else is doing, because weight training is a game of you versus you. Don't look at what anyone else is doing. Start with weights that are appropriate for your current strength level, even if that's just the bar, man. Even if it's just super light, you want to start light and build up slowly over time. That's going to create a springboard for future success. So the next question comes from Tracy. What makes so many men over 40 not want to be in shape? So this is a very interesting question that I've given a lot of thought to. And the way that I translate it is what makes men over 40 lose their desire to want to get in shape and improve their physique. And I've come up with a few different things. I'm gonna go on a bit of a rant here, so if you don't wanna hear it, just skip to the next question. But the first thing that I thought of is brain wiring, right? So dopamine is the chemical that drives desire and action. And when it's constantly hijacked by cheap hits like social media, junk food, porn, your brain gets wired to chase fast rewards and it loses interest in long-term goals like building your body. And this is such a big problem now, because I could literally open my phone right now and go onto Pornhub. I could go onto social media and just scroll for hours, and that is just completely screwing up your dopamine and your reward pathways. So because we have such easy access to instant hits of dopamine, it has basically destroyed our ability to delay gratification and work for things that take a long time to come to fruition. Things like building a body, building a good relationship, building a business. These things are difficult and you're not going to see results right away. They're going to take time. And if your brain is hooked on instant rewards like social media or porn or alcohol or drugs or whatever, it's going to feel like pulling teeth to put in work on something that's going to take a long time to come to fruition. The next thing is beliefs. So I talk to so many men over 40 every single day, whether it's talking to potential clients or my current clients. And beliefs are a really, really big thing for men over 40 because a lot of guys who are over 40 have this belief that it's too late, or that it's gonna be too hard, and that the effort levels that are gonna be required are gonna be beyond what they're willing to put in. And this is terrible. You have to get rid of these false beliefs because one of my mentors, Sam Ovens, has a really, really powerful quote about beliefs. And he said, "It doesn't matter what is true, only what you believe is true, because with work, that will become true." So in essence, all that matters in life is what you believe to be true. Because essentially, if you don't believe it's possible for you to get in really good shape, you're never going to take the actions required to make it happen. It's not impossible, you're just not going to act in alignment with someone who believes it's possible to get in great shape. So it's going to create too much internal friction for you to hit your workouts or follow a nutrition plan because deep down, you don't believe it's possible for your body to change. So you have to, at the most fundamental level, believe that it is possible for you to change because otherwise it's going to be too hard to take the actions required to change, right? So you have to rewire these false beliefs because basically, the master algorithm of life is beliefs, actions, results. So your beliefs create your actions and your actions create your results. So essentially everything starts at the beliefs level. If your beliefs are all messed up, then you're never going to take the actions required. And if you don't take the actions required, you're never going to get the result. The next thing is identity. So this is something I see a lot. A lot of men over 40 do not see themselves as someone who is in shape. And this is very similar to my last point about beliefs. So there's a really good book about this, by the way, called Psycho-Cybernetics, all about the subconscious mind and how and the identity and how it basically rules our lives. So if you do not see yourself as someone who is in shape, you will never be able to act in alignment with someone who is in shape. And that's what you need. And so people who have created great wealth or have built great bodies or done anything amazing, oftentimes they see themselves as the person with that outcome before it actually comes to life. This is where the whole thing of like fake it till you make it comes from. That there's actually a bit of truth to that, right? Because if you truly see yourself as someone who's in good shape, you'll naturally take actions in alignment with someone with that identity. And therefore, the outcome will naturally manifest in your external reality. So you have to see yourself as someone who is in shape before it actually comes to life. The next thing is standards. And this is a massive one. And this is something that's been very top of mind for me recently because I realized that the reason why I'm in good shape is not because I'm like motivated or anything. It's because I have really high standards for my physique. So for example, if I gain a few pounds, my alarm bells in my mind will go off and I'll sort of freak out and I'll pull myself back to being on track. It's because my standards are really high. So again, Sam Ovens has a really good quote where he says, "As human beings, we will do nothing to achieve our goals and dreams, but we will fight like hell to not breach our standards." It's so powerful. What that basically means is that we will never rise to our goals, we'll fall to our standards. So if your standard is not being in really good shape, you're not going to be in really good shape. You have to make that the bar. You have to make it so that you accept nothing less, right? So you have to basically adopt the same thing I have to where if you fall off track or if you're not doing the things that you need to do, the alarm bells go off in your mind and you freak out and you pull yourself back into reality, you pull yourself back on track. That is all due to standards. So a lot of men over 40 just have no standard when it comes to their physique and their fitness. You have to raise your standards. And then if you raise your standards, you will naturally do the things you need to do. The next thing that I think takes away men over 40's desire to get in better shape is simply being busy. Now, obviously this isn't a good excuse, but it is a reality, right? Because if you have kids, you have a wife, you have a career, oftentimes the last thing you want to do at the end of the day is go hit a workout, right? And this is obviously something that I've worked hard to solve with my Polarity method, because my fitness system only requires 2 workouts per week, which fits into the busiest of schedules, which makes the barrier to entry a lot smoother, right? Because a lot of men over 40, they see these workout programs online where it's like 5 workouts a week, 6 workouts a week, and they don't even start because it's like, it's so beyond the realms of what is sustainable for them. So they don't even try to begin with, right? Which is why I've put in the work to solve that with the method that I teach, which obviously works very, very well, right? And this is why it's such a successful system with men over 40. It's very doable for them. It's very practical, and it fits into their busy life, right? But this is something that does kill desire. It's like, you have kids, maybe you drop your kids off to school in the morning, and then you go to work for maybe 8 hours. And then, once your day is done and evening time comes, it's like, you just want to relax, you're tired. That sort of desire to go hit the workout is gone. The next thing that sort of kills the desire is fear of judgment or fear of failure. And this is something that I've seen a lot more commonly as of late, because a lot of men over 40 are sort of jaded in the sense that they've tried so many different things and they don't want to try something else and fail again. So they're sort of kills the desire to want to try something new, because they're like, oh, I'm just going to fail anyways, right? Which is obviously a terrible mindset, but it's just the reality, because a lot of men over 40 tried so many different things without success, right? And then the other thing is scared of looking bad. So if you're brand new, like I have a client who I just brought on board recently who has never really learned how to train properly, right? And he was terrified of going into the gym and doing exercises that he doesn't know how to do because he's scared of looking stupid or whatever, right? Which is obviously not the right mindset to have, because at the end of the day, as human beings, we are very self-centered. We don't care about what other people are doing. So it's all in your head, but this is something that kills the desire to want to get in shape. If you have to go to the gym and try new exercises and learn new things and you might look stupid, it's like, that creates a little bit of friction. The next thing is an addiction to comfort, because let's face it, modern life is way too easy, and a lot of men just avoid discomfort. And the reason they avoid discomfort is because in our easy life nowadays, we don't need to seek discomfort. It's not mandatory. Back in the day, uncomfortable things were forced upon us. It was just a part of our life. But now everything has become so easy, and we don't need to do anything uncomfortable, right? And this is also why it's so easy to stand out nowadays and so easy to separate from the pack, because so many people are lazy, man. Like the bar for winning and being, I don't want to say, better than other people is low, because most people don't do shit. Let's face it, most people don't do anything, right? So it's very easy to separate yourself from the pack just by actually seeking discomfort, right? That's honestly, like, if you want to become, in my opinion, if you want to become a success-eating machine, you should constantly be seeking discomfort, because if you're staying comfortable, you're not growing. So the next question is, putting on weight over the weekends is a trap I constantly fall into. I don't know why this is. I mean, I know why I put on weight, because I clearly eat more, but why does my mindset shift to a poor one during the weekends? I love this question, man. This is a great question. This is something that I used to struggle with, actually. And I did a lot of, I looked really deep into it, and I realized the answer is very simple. It's because we've been conditioned by school and work culture to see weekdays and weekends differently. So you probably subconsciously see weekdays as grind time and time to stay disciplined and focused, and weekends as reward time, time to relax, right? And on top of that, there's usually more social events on the weekends, more family time, more free time, which basically means more time to, go and search your fridge and eat. So basically the solution to this is that you need to rewire your brain to see weekdays and weekends as the same. This is what I did, right? And the way that I sort of rewired that is by realizing that weekends are a new invention. They're a modern invention. Weekends, this whole concept of weekends was actually created in the 19th century by Henry Ford, if I'm not mistaken. People back in the day, they used to see every day as pretty much the same. People used to work 6 to 7 days a week. That's what I do now. I see weekdays and weekends as the same. I treat my weekends identically. Now, obviously, that's not always practical. Like sometimes you do let things slip a little bit on the weekends, but this is what you have to do. You have to basically create this mindset to where, Saturday and Sunday is no different than the rest of the week. And the reason why that's so important, especially in fitness, is because especially if you're trying to lose fat loss has no mercy. You have to hit the deficit from Monday to Sunday. I actually just made a video about this. One of the biggest things in fat loss is adherence. That's one of the most important things, because a lot of guys don't understand it's about the weekly net calorie deficit that you have to hit. So you could be perfect from Monday to Friday, and if you screw it all up on the weekends, you're not gonna see success. And a lot of guys run into this because they think that if they just are perfect from Monday to Friday and then let it all go on the weekend, nothing's gonna happen. But it's about the net weekly calorie deficit that you're in. So you have to stay dialed in on the weekends, right? That's basically it. And another thing is like momentum, right? So if you're perfect from Monday to Friday, you've built some momentum. And then on the weekends, you sort of destroy that momentum. And then when Monday comes around, you're having to rebuild that momentum from scratch. And it makes it so difficult, man, because fitness is so much a momentum game. It's all about keeping that momentum. I always give this analogy to my clients, which is like to picture a stationary train that's on a track that has a downward slope about 10 feet ahead, right? Fitness is all about getting that train to that downward slope, and then it accelerates with ease. Sure, it's gonna take a lot of energy and effort to break it out of its stationary physics and to get it across those 10 feet, but once you do, it accelerates with ease. But if you're constantly falling off on the weekends, you're basically having to move that train again every single time. You know, so it's so important to stay dialed in on the weekends. You have to rewire your brain to see weekdays and weekends as the same. By the way, guys, just to pause this Q&A for a second, if you want my personal help transforming your body after 40 so you can finally love what you see in the mirror, that's exactly what I do for my clients outside of these YouTube videos. So if you're interested, just click the link in my description below and book a free call with me. On that call, we'll break down where you are right now, pinpoint exactly what's keeping you stuck, and map out the best plan to get you where you want to be. We'll also figure out if working together even makes sense to begin with. But either way, you'll leave the call with real clarity and next steps. There's no pressure at all and nothing to lose. So the next question comes from Lee. Hey Rio, I'm 44 years old and I've been following your approach to strength building for a while now, and it's all been going great, so cheers. You are welcome, my friend. However, I've always struggled with a layer of fat across my stomach and chest. I'm about 5'9" and weigh 165 pounds. My BMI is showing as normal weight, and I remember in one of your videos you said that if you're normal weight, you're most likely skinny fat and need more muscle, which I'm currently working hard with. My question is, if you're skinny fat, can you eat at maintenance calories and use the excess fat as the energy surplus, or would you still recommend a slight surplus of calories? It's a good question. I mean, when it comes to your ability to make lean gains, which essentially means to gain muscle without eating in a big calorie surplus, there are two sliding scales that come into play. There is your quantity of body fat and your level of training experience. So in other words, if you have less body fat and more training experience, it's more difficult to gain muscle without a calorie surplus. But if you have more body fat and less training experience, it's easier to gain muscle without a calorie surplus. And generally speaking, when you're skinny fat, you're not experienced with weight training, because if you were, you'd have some muscle and then you wouldn't be skinny fat, right? So what I would tell you is just to remember the main goal, which is that when you're skinny fat, your priority is to just gain strength. Because the reason why you're skinny fat is because you don't have enough muscle. And the only way to gain muscle is to increase your strength. So that's your only goal. So what I would tell you is to just try it out. Like, this is not something I can say like with absolute certainty. It's something you're gonna have to test. So if you can gain strength while eating at maintenance, you're golden. Like you're a success, it's working, right? Because if your strength is going up, your weight's sort of staying the same, it's a sign that you're gaining muscle without gaining any body fat. However, if this doesn't work with success, you might be in a position to where you need a small calorie surplus. So just test it out. Whatever allows you to gain more consistent strength is what you should do. The next question is, how practical is progressive overload for men over 40, and how do you deal with plateaus? This is a question I get quite often, and honestly, progressive overload is very practical when you follow a good system that's actually built for men over 40. The issue is that most men over 40 are following crappy training systems that are not built for them, and therefore they do not see progressive overload, and then it leads them into this state where they're like, oh, progressive overload is not practical, it's not achievable. It's like, no. It is very achievable when you follow a good system, right? And generally speaking, the mistakes that most men over 40 make that prevent them from achieving progressive overload is lack of recovery, so training too often, not having enough rest days each week, not actually having a strength progression system to guide their progress over time, not tracking their workouts and not having concrete reference points that tell them when it's time to add the weight, and then simply not eating or sleeping well, right? Those are generally the sort of landmines, the things that stop men over 40 from achieving progressive overload. Now, the process might be a bit slower than if you were, say, 20 years old, right? But who cares? At the end of the day, if you're getting into this now, chances are you're in this for the rest of your life, right? So it is an infinite game. Like, fitness and health is an infinite game. It's not a finite game where there's like a finish line. So you shouldn't be in a rush. You should focus on the inputs not the outputs, right? And there's actually a funny story. I have a funny story about this. My dad, who is 52 years old, I got him into weight training when he was 52. He's 53 now. He's been in it for about a year and a half, maybe a bit more. And when he was first starting out, my dad was achieving progressive overload so quickly. And he got to this point where he was like, Rio, like this can't be practical, man. Like if I keep going at this pace, like I'm gonna get hurt. And I was like, well, first of all, this is a great problem to have. And then I looked at his form, and he was sort of he was sacrificing his form to slap more weight on the bar, and that's sort of where the problem lied, right? So I told him, I was like, listen, just take it slow. There's no rush here. You know what I mean? Don't add weight to the bar too fast. Just take it slow and focus on progressing slowly over time. And one of the things that I did for my dad and that I now do for my clients is I tell them, don't be afraid to stick with the same weight for a couple weeks to master it and really get used to it before you add more weight. That makes progressive overload more practical for most men over 40. So the way that I progress in strength with my clients is we follow something called a double progression method. And the double progression method is where on your sets, you work within rep ranges. Maybe it's like 6 to 8, for example, right? And you stick with the same weight until you hit the top end of the rep range. So maybe on the first week, you start with 6, the second week, try and get to 7, third week, you try and get to 8. And generally speaking, with this progression method, once you hit 8, you would then add 5 pounds to the bar, and then you'd go back to the bottom of the rep range, and then you'd build your way up again over time, right? And even if you're a brand new beginner, sometimes you can just add 5 pounds to the bar every single week. But what I've started to do with a lot of my over 40 clients is that when they hit the top end of the rep range and it's technically time to add weight to the bar, sometimes I tell them like, hey, just stick with this same weight for maybe 2-3 more weeks. And that makes it a bit more practical because then they're not freaking out about like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready to add 5 pounds. Like that was pretty heavy. So it creates a more safe, steady, and slower, more practical progression over time. So that's what I would say. Just don't be afraid to stick with the same weight for a little bit longer than you think you might be supposed to, because you can still get muscle growth out of the same weight for 2 to 3 weeks before your body fully adapts to it and it's no longer providing a potent muscle building stimulus, right? So don't be afraid to do that. And if that makes progressive overload more practical for you, then just do that. As far as how to break through plateaus, I have a 3-step process that I use to break through plateaus for myself and for my clients. The first thing you want to do is you want to do a nutrition and recovery audit, because usually most guys think they've stalled because of some like complicated reason. But generally speaking, it's usually just that your nutrition or sleep is off. So you have to look at your nutrition and see like, am I in a calorie surplus and am I gaining weight slowly? Because if you're not in a surplus, you're not gaining weight, you shouldn't really expect to gain that much strength. Then you also just have to make sure that you're sleeping enough. Are you getting 8 hours per night? For most guys, just this first step fixes the plateau, because it's usually one of those 2 problems. And then if that doesn't work, and you know without a shred of doubt that your sleep and your nutrition's dialed in, then what you want to do is you want to reduce your training volume and frequency. So when a lot of guys hit plateaus, they think they need to add more, which is just ridiculous, because if you apply some common sense, you realize that generally the reason you plateau is because you have not freed up enough recovery. You're overtraining a little bit. And as you get stronger, you're lifting heavier weights, which is more strenuous on your body and it's harder to recover from. So in order to break the plateau, you have to reduce how much training you're doing and free up some recovery and some resources. So this might mean, for example, like taking away an exercise, or dropping a set here or there, or going from training twice a week to 3 times every 2 weeks. So you have like 5 days of recovery between sessions, going from training 3 days a week down to 2. That's usually what is required to get progress moving again, and you have to keep repeating that process until you stall basically, and then you can just reset everything, right? Which brings me to my next point. If the reduction in training volume and frequency doesn't fix it, then generally you have to reset your training cycle, which basically just means taking 7 to 10 days off of training completely, not hitting the gym, not doing anything, fully relaxing, letting your body recover. And then when you come back to the gym after your break, take 10% of the weights that you were using off of all the exercises you're doing, and then build your way back up again slowly. And that usually works magical. That works really, really well. Now, this is if you have hit there are 2 different ways people define strength plateaus. some people think a strength plateau is when just one exercise stalls. I don't see it that way. I see a strength plateau as when multiple exercises stall. That's a real strength plateau. And if that's what you're facing, this is what you'd want to do, what I just explained. But if just a single exercise stalls, that's not really a big deal, because if your strength is going up on the other exercises, it means you're still gaining muscle and you're still progressing. Maybe this exercise is just lag behind a little bit. But if you plateau for like maybe 3-4 weeks on a single exercise, what I would do is first do a weight reset. So similar to what I just said, take maybe 5% of the weight you were using off the bar, and then build your way up again slowly by like over a few weeks. The reason why that works well is that generally by the time you get back to the weights you were using before, you're able to cross over into new weight territory, because you almost gave yourself like a little bit of a reset. You sort of consolidated the troops, make sure your form is good, and then you can cross over into new weight. If that doesn't work, swap the exercise for something similar. So if you're doing, let's say, a flat bench press and you stall on the flat bench press, go to an inclined dumbbell bench press. So swap for a movement that is of the same movement pattern. So the next question comes from Michael. What are the best methods to improve recovery and sleep? So I'll be honest, this is not my main expertise, right? So take this with a grain of salt, but generally speaking, what I've seen when clients have sleeping issues or recovery issues, usually just applying the basics fixes things. But if you have an actual sleeping disorder, I wouldn't know. I honestly wouldn't know. But in terms of the basics, that's basically just making sure that you're sleeping in a cold room and that you're sleeping butt-ass naked, because really, body temperature has the biggest impact on your ability to relax and fall asleep and to stay asleep and have a good sleep quality. So make sure your room is relatively cold, and don't wear like tight shorts, right? You got to let the cojones breathe a little bit, right? The next thing is no light. So make sure that there's not even like a single speck of light in your room. I know that's a little bit difficult, but like get blackout curtains at least. Try to reduce the amount of light. Don't, for the love of God, don't sleep with a night light. That's ridiculous. I don't know why people still do that, because light disturbs your pineal gland's ability to secrete melatonin, which is the hormone that's responsible for having you relax, fall asleep, and then stay asleep. The other thing is to go outside during the day. So if you're sitting inside in a dark room, you're sort of screwing up your pattern a little bit. You're sort of screwing up your rhythm, because your circadian rhythm is basically the engine behind your sleep and wake cycle. And your circadian rhythm is controlled by light exposure. So it really helps to get outside during the day so that you make sure your circadian rhythm is functioning as it should. The next question is, how many warm-up sets would you recommend, and how many working sets, and how close to failure? You only really need warm-ups for the first few exercises of your routine. It really depends what routine you're following. If you're doing a full body split, like I generally recommend twice a week, then usually the first 3 exercises of each routine are gonna follow different movement patterns. And so you're gonna need to warm up for each one. But usually it's just about 2 to 3 warm-ups, you know? But it's really an individual thing. So if you need less and you don't take long to warm up, then do less. If you need more, then do more. The whole philosophy behind warming up for training is to do the minimum amount, holy shit, what did I just say? The minimum amount required to get into your working sets, right? The whole idea with warm-up sets is to get blood flowing and to get you psychologically prepared to lift heavy weights. So do the minimum amount you need in order to achieve that. For me, sometimes, you know, due to different knee things and hips and whatever, sometimes I need a lot of warm-up sets for things like squats or leg presses, right? But for upper body, I really don't need that much, you know? So just sort of experiment with it a little bit. The whole idea is just to like get some light sets in. I sort of ramp up to my first working set, and then, you know, that's basically how I do it. A lot of people, some people go really light, some people go really heavy on their warm-ups. I like to do one at like maybe 50% of my first working set, and then maybe one at 70% of my first working set, and then I get into it, right? As far as the working sets, for me, it's almost always 2, and that's what my clients do as well. 2 sets per exercise when you're training with intensity or training hard is the sweet spot. And occasionally I'll do 1 set, or occasionally I'll do 3 sets. It's never more than 3 sets though. It's always between 1 and 3, with, in my opinion, the sweet spot being 2. So the thing is if you're training with intensity, less is more. Always, man. It's always better to do fewer sets, but to put real effort into those sets than to do a bunch of half-assed sets, you know, because I've experimented with doing anywhere from like 1 to 5 sets per exercise over the years. I've always found that doing fewer sets just leads to better results. You know, you stimulate more muscle growth because you can train harder, your effort's not diluted, and it's easier to recover from. And your sets, when you're training in this manner, should be pushed to about 0 to 1 reps in reserve. The whole idea is to squeeze out every possible rep you can do using good form. The next question is, what's the proper amount of volume to do each workout to not feel like crap the next day? This is a question that's difficult for me to answer over a video because the reality is that everybody has a different recovery ability, right? We could take two 40-year-olds and they could have two completely different recovery abilities due to the different circumstances in their life, right? Their stress levels, how much activity they do, maybe they have a laborious job, maybe they don't. Like there's so many different factors that come into play that influence your recovery ability. So it's really hard for me to say. And this, by the way, is one of the benefits of working with a coach, is that you can have someone who can sort of tweak that for you to find the perfect amount that leads to the best amount of progress, right? That's in essence what I do for my clients when it comes to the training system that I provide to them. But if you want to just like a rule of thumb, a general guideline, I've been screwing around with this stuff for years now, and I've sort of found that if you're training twice a week, the sweet spot is 5 to 6 exercises per workout and 2 sets each, which is a total of 10 to 12 total sets, right? And if you're pushing it hard, that's all you need. And then if you're doing 3 workouts a week, generally 4 to 5 exercises per workout, 2 sets each, for a total of 8 to 10 total sets per workout. If you enjoyed this video, then you're gonna love this video right here where I talk about the 2 workout, 2 set method that's getting men over 40 jacked fast.